acknowledging he was aware of the investigation.
Okay. I'm sorry. I was aware that they asked for an investigation, but that's all I know about it, and I don't think anything else.
Last month, Attorney General Bill Barr personally got involved to drop the Flynn case. The judge overseeing the matter, Emmett Sullivan, refused, hiring his own attorney to argue why the case could potentially move forward to sentencing. He set a hearing for July 16th. Sullivan has yet to say if that hearing will still happen. Judge Sullivan has hired an attorney. He could still appeal to what's called en banc, which is the full circuit court, if he wants to in this specific case. Meanwhile, Attorney General Bill Barr and the top brass here at the DOJ, they are praising this decision today. They're happy about it. That's the same story down Pennsylvania Avenue, where Chief White House correspondent John Roberts picks up this story.
In the Oval Office today, meeting with Poland's President Andrzej Duda, President Trump praising the order from an appellate court to drop the case against his former national security advisor, Michael Flynn.
Very happy about General Flynn. He was treated horribly. He was treated very, very horribly by a group of very bad people. The Obama administration spied on a campaign. This is just the first one. He's been exonerated.
At a Rose Garden news conference, President Trump also weighing in on the Democrats' move to stop South Carolina Senator Tim Scott's police reform bill, the Justice Act, from moving forward.
The Democrats don't want to do it because they want to weaken our police. They want to take away immunity.
Protests, some of them violent and destructive, continue across the country. In response to Monday's attempt by protesters to pull down the statue of President Andrew Jackson across the street from the White House, President Trump will this week sign an executive order providing stiff penalties for anyone defacing or damaging national monuments.
We have the Monuments Act already, which means 10 years in jail. But I think we're going to consolidate various things. We're going to come out with a very strong executive order, and I should have that by the end of the week, which is fast approaching.
The federal government is also calling in the National Guard. Interior Secretary David Bernhardt today asking the Pentagon to dispatch 100 troops from the D.C. National Guard to protect monuments in the nation's capital. President Duda's appearance at the White House was the first visit of a foreign leader since the coronavirus crisis and comes just 4 days before the Polish election. Critics say the meeting, meant to show close ties between President Trump and Duda, is tantamount to election interference. President Duda says it was simply a matter of timing.
President Trump is realizing the interests of his own country, and I'm realizing the interests of Poland. So we are looking for a win-win situation where both parties are the winners.
I don't think he needs my help. I'm honored that this is a day that's, I guess, just before your election. I'm honored, but he will do very well with or without us.
President Trump also confirmed that as he draws down U.S. troops in Germany, some of those troops will be redeployed to Poland. Asked what signal that sends to Russia, President Trump today says it sends a strong signal. And the president went on to criticize the German Chancellor, Angela Merkel, for buying Russian oil and gas and expecting the United States to defend Germany, saying, just doesn't work that way. Brett?
Thanks, John. Director Wray, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
There are a lot of topics we want to talk about and cover here with you. I want to talk about, first, foreign influence in this country. The Justice Department recently indicted a professor at Harvard for lying about his relationship with the Chinese government. For people who don't know about China and what they're trying to do in the U.S., how much is China doing? How much is China spying in the U.S.?
Brett, there's no country that presents a broader, more comprehensive threat to America's innovation, to our economic security, and to our democratic ideas than China does. Just to give you some context for that, just as we're sitting here having this conversation, the FBI has over 2,000 active investigations that trace back to the government of China.
2,000?
Right. And that's, put a little more context on that, that's about a 1,300% increase in terms of economic espionage investigations with the Chinese nexus from about a decade ago.
So how much is that economic espionage? How much is it government espionage?
Well, that's the thing that a lot of people don't really understand about the Chinese government. This is not about the Chinese people or Chinese Americans. This is about the Chinese government and the Chinese Communist Party, and they are pursuing a campaign of intellectual property theft, economic espionage, cyber intrusions that target businesses big and small all across the country and our academic research institutions. And they do it not just through traditional government officials, which they certainly do, but also through what we sometimes call non-traditional collectors, which can be businessmen, high-level scientists, high-level academics, people like that, all of whom are in different ways incentivized to steal American innovation and confidential information and take it back to China.
So in the 30s and 40s, the Soviet Union, for example, had more than 100 spies in the State Department. Is espionage a real problem in the U.S.? What is China doing on that front?
Well, traditional espionage is certainly, the old sort of spy versus spy thing, still very much a phenomenon in today's world. But we're much more focused in many ways on the economic espionage, which targets American businesses and hurts American jobs, American consumers. And it's everything from Fortune 100 companies to startups. It's agriculture, it's high tech, it's aviation, it's healthcare. As I said before, it's our academic research institutions.
Are they taking an interest in elections?
They certainly have an interest in influencing our political thought, our policies, to try to shift them in a more friendly, pro-China, pro-Chinese Communist Party direction. And so sometimes that gets wrapped up in election issues.
Is the FBI in charge of the investigation of the origins of the coronavirus?
We certainly have a role in looking into the origins of the coronavirus.
Are you getting closer?
I would say at this point, there's nothing to add to what the intelligence community has already said publicly on that. There's still insufficient information to really know exactly how the virus emanated from Wuhan.
When you say that China's active, when there is a crisis, for example, the protests after the George Floyd killing, are you seeing foreign intervention to kind of stir up chaos inside the U.S.?
We have certainly seen in the past a variety of foreign adversaries looking to amplify controversy in this country. And they use state media, they use social media. Some of that's through propaganda, some of that's through disinformation, some of that's through just fake information. And we are looking carefully at the prospect of foreign influence or foreign interference in all of the protest activity that's occurred over the last few weeks.
The president has talked, and the administration has talked about Antifa, yet what the Justice Department and you all have moved on is this Boogaloo group that is kind of a right-wing group that is trying to stir up chaos to make it look like it's left-wing. I talked to the Attorney General about this last time we sat down. Are there any Antifa investigations ongoing?
The violence that occurred during the protests of the past few weeks is driven by a variety of different motivations and ideologies. It's not all the work of any single ideology, movement, or group. We certainly have a number of active, ongoing investigations into violent anarchist extremists, some of whom self-identify or otherwise linked to the Antifa movement. But I think it's a mistake to try to put a lot of this into sort of neat ideological buckets. We're really about the violence, not the ideology.
Saw the letter you sent to your FBI family after the George Floyd killings and what that means internally. What have you been doing to change the dynamic in the wake of all of this?
So I understand completely that there are a lot of people out there in this country who are hurting, who are angry, who are upset over instances of racism or where the justice system has failed people of color in particular. I would also say, though, that the law enforcement family is also hurting. And there are lots and lots and lots of police officers out there who are putting their lives on the line every day, who are, unfairly tarred by the misconduct of a few. So what we really need is for people to come together, to listen to each other, and to work together to try to figure out a better way forward.
When I talked to the Attorney General, he suggested that there's going to be some kind of federal involvement in setting clear standards for police units across the country.
I think there's a general agreement among police agencies that we need clearer standards. We have to make sure those standards are trained to, and we have to make sure that there are systems in place that hold officers accountable.
So is that a federal effort? Does that suddenly become a federal training effort?
I think we're going to need a strong federal participation in this effort in helping to set standards.
So what does that look like?
Well, the FBI's role is a few different things. First, in terms of accountability, we pursue and have for some time civil rights, color of law investigations where excessive force violates federal law. But we also participate in doing training and setting best practices for police departments, state and local, around the country.
You know, the president said about these monuments coming down.
We are looking at long-term jail sentences for these vandals and these hoodlums and these anarchists and agitators. They're bad people. They don't love our country, and they're not taking down our monuments.
Is that going to happen?
Look, equal justice is essential, but violence and destruction of federal property is not the way to get there. And if there are appropriate bases for federal investigations, we'll pursue them.
What is the biggest threat you see? For a long time, it was radical Islamic terrorism. What's the biggest threat that you see as FBI director?
The biggest terrorist threat here in the U.S., here in the homeland, is what we would call sort of homegrown violent extremists. And these are people who are lone actors typically, motivated by a variety of different ideologies, some jihadists, some others, who go very quickly from radicalization to attack, typically radicalized online, and they're going after soft targets, schools, shopping malls, easy to hit targets and using easily accessible weapons. And those kinds of terrorists are much harder to detect and prevent in many ways. And so that's what we think of as the greatest threat to here in the homeland.
What's the morale here at the FBI?
I actually think the morale in the FBI is quite good. Our attrition rate is down to 0.4%. And there are not a lot of organizations out there, public or private, that can say that.
Now, the investigation into the FISA abuse, there was false information provided to the FISA court, according to the IG. Bogus information about this from a rival presidential campaign in the Steele dossier. One of your own top attorneys fabricated evidence to suggest Carter Page was a secret Russian asset when in fact he had helped the U.S. build a case against Russian operatives. There are a lot of people who look at what has come out, and understanding the Durham report is yet to come, likely this summer. They wonder, will anybody be held accountable? Will anything come of this?
Well, first let me say this. I think that IG report describes conduct that I consider unacceptable and unrepresentative of who the FBI is as an institution and cannot be allowed to happen again. And I've made that very clear to our workforce. Now, I've put in place an entirely new leadership team. And even though I wasn't director at the time of all of this, my team and I are fiercely committed to making sure we fix the problems of the past. We've accepted every finding and recommendation in that IG report, but then gone above and beyond, put in place over 40 corrective measures that enhance our training, strengthen our processes, build in more oversight and accountability, and have referred employees, current employees, for discipline. Now, having said that, the most senior people involved in this activity, in this report, are long gone, either terminated, some during my tenure, or retired or resigned.
Has the FBI disclosed every piece of evidence related to the Durham inquiry?
We've cooperated fully with the Durham investigation. In fact, we even have, a lot of people don't know this, we actually have agents assigned to working on the Durham investigation. So we're very much lashed up with that.
Congress says they have a tough time getting documents and things from you. Senator Grassley in particular about the Michael Flynn calls. Were you responsible for holding back from Congress some of that stuff?
I think we've tried very, very hard to be transparent and cooperative with all the relevant congressional committees. We've produced all sorts of information and tried to really lean forward.
Why did it take so long for the material to come out for Horowitz, publicly? Like, with the FISA, the Flynn 302s, the reports. It seemed like it took forever. Why was that? I mean, if it wasn't court orders and the IG's efforts, we wouldn't know anything about any of this.
For the IG's efforts, we've bent over backwards to be transparent and cooperative with the IG, and he actually, in his report, talks about how fully cooperative and transparent we were with him.
The Flynn defense attorneys, Michael Flynn, former NSA, National Security Advisor, said they were not provided the exculpatory evidence that eventually came out during the trial. They weren't provided it. Who held that back?
Decisions about producing documents in a criminal prosecution are typically handled by the prosecutors. I will say that, of course, the Flynn investigation, which took place before I started, and then by the time I started was in the hands of the special counsel's office, is something that has, in my view, raised serious concerns and questions, which is why I ordered an after-action review by our inspection division to take a look at whether or not the FBI's policies and procedures need to be changed, and if there are any current employees left who may bear any responsibility for misconduct.
This interview happened before the appeals court decision on the Flynn case, siding with the Justice Department. But the FBI says no matter how it's decided, the after-action review will continue. The president gave an interview in which he said just the other day, what does he think about this whole process as we wait for the Durham report? And he characterized it as treason.
It's treason. Look, look. When I came out a long time ago, I said they've been spying on my campaign. Turned out I was right.
What are you, looking at what you know, think this is?
On the Crossfire Hurricane matter, that's the subject of the IG report, I think it describes conduct that is unacceptable. Period. Full stop, and cannot be allowed to happen and will not be allowed to happen in
But whether
today's
it's criminal
FBI.
or not.
Criminal decisions, charging decisions, prosecution decisions are not made by the FBI director. Those are made by across the street at the Justice Department by the prosecutors.
But somebody here altered that FISA report, and that would be a criminal offense, right?
And that individual no longer works at the FBI, and I don't want to get out in front of the Durham investigation.
Are you worried what the impact is going to be when that all comes out, knowing what you know?
I think allegations of misconduct need to be taken seriously. I think there are serious questions that have been raised here, and they need to be given a serious look. And whatever the impact is, the impact is.
Have you ever one-on-one gone to the president in the Oval Office and say, hey, listen, this is what I know, this is what the FBI did, and here's what it is?
I have not met with the president one-on-one.
You've not met ever with him one-on-one?
No.
And this president has, well, publicly said he wants to see the jury is still out, is what he said about you.
Let's see what happens with him. Look, the jury's still out.
If you don't meet one-on-one with the president and he says the jury's still out, are you worried at all about how the president thinks about you and the job?
No, I think I have a very professional relationship with the president, which is, I think, what every FBI director and every president should have. And I've certainly had plenty of occasions where I've met with the president, just with others present, right?
You're on Senator Graham's list to testify. Do you expect to be up there testifying in his investigation?
I'll see. I've testified quite frequently in this role. It seems to be a routine part of the job.
What's the toughest thing you deal with every day?
The sheer volume of the threats that face this country is remarkable. And so just to give you a flavor of it, you know, in the past few months alone, our Joint Terrorism Task Forces have thwarted potential terrorist attacks in Tampa, in New York, in Cleveland, in Kansas City. And then you had COVID come in, right? And we've probably got over 400 COVID-19 fraud investigations open. We have probably in the last year something like 1,500 kids that the FBI has recovered or rescued from child sexual exploitation or human trafficking. We talked about China before. Well, the FBI is opening a new counterintelligence investigation that ties back to China every 10 hours. So you put some of those things, and that's just sort of the tip of the iceberg.
And your relationship with the Attorney General?
The Attorney General and I have, I think, an excellent working relationship. I value him as a friend and a colleague.
Director Wray, we appreciate the time. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Brett.
We'll bring you back to Washington, other headlines and stories after this break.